What would you risk to expose a billion-dollar empire built on the backs of people who look like you? Marcus Webb is about to find out that some secrets are worth dying for, and that the most dangerous weapon isn't a gun, it's the truth. Marcus Webb's hands trembled as he adjusted his tie in the bathroom mirror of Titanium Global Industries' 50th floor executive suite, not from nervousness, though any sane person would be terrified of what he was about to do, but from barely contained rage. Through the mahogany door, he could hear Richard Caldwell's booming laugh, that particular brand of entitled mirth that only came from men who'd never been told no in their entire lives. Men who believed the world was their inheritance and everyone else was just living in it by permission. Marcus studied his reflection. 28 years old, dark brown skin that had been called unprofessional at his last job when he wouldn't chemically straighten his natural hair. A master's degree from Howard University in business, analytics that had taken him 6 years to complete because he'd worked full-time to avoid drowning in debt. Eyes that had seen his father work himself to death in a warehouse owned by men like Richard Caldwell, only for the company to deny his mother the pension they'd promised. Those same eyes now held something dangerous. Purpose. Mr. Webb? A crisp voice interrupted his thoughts. Jessica Thornton, Caldwell's executive assistant, stood in the doorway. She was a tall white woman in her 40s, with a silver blonde hair pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Mr. Caldwell is ready for you now. Marcus smoothed his tie one final time. Thank you, Miss Thornton. The office beyond was obscene in its luxury. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of downtown Chicago, where Marcus could see the South Side, neighborhood where he'd grown up, a gray smudge of poverty in the distance, barely visible from this height. The irony wasn't lost on him. Caldwell could literally look down on people like Marcus from up here. Richard Caldwell sat behind a desk that probably cost more than Marcus's car. He was 63, with silver hair, ruddy cheeks, and the physique of someone whose only exercise was golf at exclusive country clubs that didn't admit black members until the 1990s, and then only reluctantly. He wore a navy suit that Marcus's practiced eye recognized as bespoke Savile Row, probably $12,000 minimum. Marcus, come in, come in. Caldwell stood, extending his hand with practiced corporate warmth. His handshake was firm, aggressive, the kind meant to establish dominance. Sit down. Can I get you anything? Coffee? Water? Water would be great. Thank you. Marcus sat in one of the leather chairs facing the desk, noting the family photos strategically placed. Caldwell with various politicians, Caldwell receiving awards, Caldwell's family at their Cape Cod estate. Not a single brown or black face in any of the photos, despite Titanium Global Industries claiming to be an equal opportunity employer committed to diversity. Jessica poured water from a crystal pitcher into an equally expensive glass and set it before Marcus without a word. Then she disappeared, closing the door with a soft click. Caldwell leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. I've got to tell you, Marcus, your resume is impressive. Howard University, excellent school. 3 years at Brennan & Associates, top-tier performance reviews. Your recommendations from Professor Chen and Director Martinez were glowing. They said you were the most talented analyst they'd encountered in years. I appreciate that, Mr. Caldwell. Marcus kept his voice steady, professional. Inside, his heart hammered against his ribs. Call me Richard, please. Caldwell smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Those eyes were calculating, measuring, judging. Marcus had seen that look before. White men evaluating whether a black man was one of the good ones, whether he was safe, controllable. Richard, Marcus corrected, taking a sip of water. It probably cost more per bottle than what people in Flint, Michigan paid for poisoned water. Now I want to be straight with you. Marcus, Caldwell leaned forward. adopting what Marcus assumed was supposed to be a confidential tone. This position, senior, data analyst for strategic operations. It's not your typical number-crunching role. You'd be working directly with me on some very sensitive projects. I need someone I can trust absolutely, someone discreet, someone who understands that what we discuss in this office stays in this office. I understand completely. Marcus met Caldwell's gaze without flinching. Discretion is essential in any senior position. Good. Caldwell nodded approvingly. You see, Titanium Global Industries is at a critical juncture. We're expanding into new markets, making moves that will define the next decade of American industry. But with great opportunity comes great scrutiny. The media, activist groups, regulators, everyone wants to tear down successful companies like ours. They don't understand that business requires tough decisions. Sometimes you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet. Marcus's jaw tightened imperceptibly. His father had been one of those eggs. So had thousands of others. I need people on my team who understand that, Caldwell continued. People who won't get squeamish when the work gets complicated. People who can see the bigger picture. He paused, then added with calculated casualness, I've actually been wanting to diversify my senior leadership team for some time now. Having someone like you in this role would send a powerful message about our commitment to inclusion. There it was, the real reason Marcus was here, not because of his skills or education or accomplishments. He was a trophy, a prop, a black face to parade around when Caldwell needed to prove Titanium Global Industries wasn't the racist monolith everyone knew it was. I appreciate the opportunity, sir. Marcus forced a smile. Though, I'd prefer to be valued for my analytical skills rather than my demographics. Caldwell laughed, that booming self-satisfied laugh again. Of course. That's exactly what I mean. You're sharp, Marcus. Too many people these days want to play the victim. They don't want to work hard. They just want handouts. But you're different. You understand merit. Marcus wanted to vomit. Instead, he nodded thoughtfully. Hard work is essential. Exactly. Caldwell slapped the desk enthusiastically. That's why I like you. You're not one of those bitter types, always complaining about racism this and discrimination that. You've pulled yourself up by your bootstraps. That's the American dream right there. My father died at 57, Marcus thought. His bootstraps broke under the weight of your company's negligence. But please, tell me more about the American dream. So, Caldwell continued, pulling out a folder from his desk, let me tell you about the Southbridge project. This is highly confidential, NDA-level confidential, but I want you to understand what you'd be working on. Marcus leaned forward attentively, though his pulse quickened. This was it. This was what 6 months of carefully planned infiltration had been building toward. We're acquiring manufacturing facilities in economically depressed areas, Caldwell explained, sliding several documents across the desk. Places where labor is cheap, regulations are lax, and local governments are desperate enough to give us massive tax incentives. The beauty of it is we can restructure these operations for maximum efficiency, automation, reduced labor costs, streamlined supply chains. We project a 340% increase in profit margins within the first 3 years. Marcus scanned the documents of predominantly Black and Latino neighborhoods, unemployment rates, median income levels, existing union contracts marked for renegotiation. What happens to the current workforce? Marcus asked, keeping his tone neutral. Caldwell waved his hand dismissively. That's the beautiful part. We're not technically firing anyone. We're simply offering them new contracts at market rate, which reflects the actual value of their labor. If they don't want to accept, that's their choice. We'll have plenty of people willing to work for those wages. And the unions? Union contracts become void when we restructure the corporate entity. It's all legal, all above board. Well, Caldwell smirked. Mostly legal. That's where the discretion I mentioned comes in. Some of the financial instruments we're using to structure these acquisitions are, let's say they exist in a gray area. The SEC probably wouldn't approve if they understood what we were doing. But if we're smart, if we bury the mechanisms deep enough in the data, no one will ever find out. Marcus's mind raced. This was worse than he'd imagined. Caldwell wasn't just exploiting workers. He was systematically targeting Black and Latino communities, stealing their jobs, dismantling their unions, and making it look legal. Your job, Caldwell continued, would be to create the analytical models that justify these acquisitions. We need data that shows these communities are underperforming, or that our intervention is economic revitalization. You'd also help structure the financial instruments to make them audit-proof. Can you handle that? Marcus met Caldwell's eyes. This was the moment. Accept, and he'd have access to everything. Refuse, and 6 months of work would be wasted. When do I start? Caldwell's face broke into a genuine smile, the smile of a predator who just secured fresh prey. That's what I like to hear. Jessica will handle the paperwork. You'll start Monday. Welcome to Titanium Global Industries, Marcus. I think this is the beginning of a very profitable relationship. They shook hands again. Caldwell's grip was triumphant, celebratory. Marcus's was steady, controlled. As Marcus left the office, passing Jessica's desk, where she was already preparing his employment documents, he allowed himself the smallest of smiles. Richard Caldwell had just invited a fox into his henhouse, but Caldwell didn't know that Marcus Webb wasn't there to make money. He was there to burn the whole operation down. Part 2, the education. Marcus's first day at Titanium Global Industries began at 7:45 a.m. The office culture, he quickly learned, was one of performative workaholism. Arrive early, leave late, never show weakness. It was also overwhelmingly white. As he stepped off the elevator onto the executive floor, Marcus counted the faces. 27 people visible in the open-plan office area. 23 white, 3 Asian, 1 black, a woman who wouldn't meet his eyes when he smiled at her. She'd learned, he suspected, that acknowledging racial kinship in corporate America was dangerous. Better to be invisible. Marcus, there you are. Kenneth Bradshaw, the chief operations officer, approached with that peculiar corporate enthusiasm that always seemed slightly manic. Bradshaw was in his 50s, prematurely bald, with wire-rimmed glasses and the pallor of someone who hadn't seen natural sunlight in months. Welcome aboard. Let me show you to your office. Office, not a cubicle. Marcus had an actual office with a door and a window. It was small, barely large enough for a desk, 2 chairs and a filing cabinet, but it was private. That was the point, he realized. They needed him isolated, contained, somewhere. He couldn't accidentally overhear conversations he wasn't meant to. Here, you'll report directly to Richard, but you'll also coordinate with me on operational implementation, Bradshaw explained, gesturing to the computer setup on the desk. Passwords are in the envelope. You have access to our secured server. That's where all the Southbridge documentation lives. IT will set up your encryption keys this afternoon. Any questions? Just excited to get started. Marcus kept his voice bright, eager. The perfect new employee? Great attitude. Bradshaw clapped him on the shoulder, and Marcus fought the urge to flinch. He hated when white colleagues touched him without permission. It always felt like a claim of ownership. Richard's in a meeting until 10, but he wants to see you then. Get settled in, review the Southbridge files. Welcome to the team. After Bradshaw left, Marcus closed the door and exhaled slowly. He was actually in. He opened the envelope with his passwords, logged into the computer, and accessed the secured server. What he found made his blood run cold. The Southbridge project wasn't one acquisition. It was 17. Marcus clicked through the files, his photographic memory cataloging every detail. Caldwell's company was targeting manufacturing facilities, distribution centers, and logistics hubs across the American South and Midwest, specifically in cities with majority black populations: Mobile, Alabama; Jackson, Mississippi; Gary, Indiana; Detroit, Michigan; East St. Louis, Illinois. The pattern was obvious once you knew what to look for. These were communities still recovering from decades of economic devastation, places where a major employer closing down didn't just hurt, it destroyed. Places where people were desperate, enough to accept terrible wages, because terrible wages were better than nothing. Titanium Global Industries planned to buy these facilities at bargain prices. Many were struggling financially, then systematically dismantle everything that made them even marginally worker-friendly. Union contracts nullified, health benefits reduced, wages cut, safety standards minimized, environmental regulations circumvented through creative corporate restructuring. And the genius of it, the truly evil brilliance, was that Caldwell would market it as economic salvation. Titanium Global Industries invests in struggling communities. New management brings hope to economically depressed regions. The press releases were already drafted, sitting in a folder labeled PR Strategy. Marcus opened another file, Labor Optimization Models. His stomach turned. The models projected how many workers would quit when offered the new contracts. They calculated, literally calculated, with mathematical precision, how much suffering people would endure before walking away. There were probability matrices for union resistance, contingency plans for media backlash, financial projections that treated human lives as variable costs to be minimized. One document made Marcus's hands shake with rage. Demographic Impact Assessment. It explicitly analyzed racial demographics. It identified that these communities were majority black, not as a moral concern, but as a strategic advantage. The analysis argued that predominantly black workers were more likely to have criminal records due to systemic over-policing, though the document didn't mention that, less likely to have alternative employment options due to discrimination, unmentioned, and less likely to generate sympathetic media coverage due to racist media narratives, also unmentioned. In other words, Caldwell had deliberately chosen to target black communities because he believed he could get away with exploiting them more easily. Marcus forced himself to breathe slowly, to think clearly. Rage was understandable, but rage without strategy was useless. He pulled out the encrypted phone he'd purchased 6 months ago, untraceable, paid for in cash, registered under a fake name. He took photos of key documents, uploading them to a secure cloud server. He'd set up through a series of VPNs and proxy servers. The technology was the same kind journalists used to protect sources in authoritarian countries. Marcus had learned it from his friend Jamal, who'd spent 3 years working for WikiLeaks before burning out. A knock on the door made Marcus's heart stop. He quickly closed the browser, deleted the history, and called out, "Come in." The door opened to reveal a young black man, maybe 25, wearing an expensive suit that somehow looked uncomfortable on him. He had neat locks, anxious eyes, and the demeanor of someone perpetually waiting for the other shoe to drop. "Hey," the man said quietly. "I'm Devin Carter, junior associate in strategic planning. Thought I'd introduce myself." Marcus stood, shaking Devin's hand. "Marcus Webb, good to meet you." Devin glanced over his shoulder, then stepped inside and closed the door. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "Look, I know you just started, but I wanted to give you a heads up. Be careful here, really careful." "What do you mean?" "You're the 4th black senior analyst they've hired in 2 years." Devin's jaw tightened. The other 3 all got fired within 6 months. It's always the same pattern. They bring someone in, give them access to sensitive projects. Then when something goes wrong, they blame the black employee. Suddenly there's discrepancies in the data, or concerns about judgment, or cultural fit issues, and just like that, you're out. Marcus felt his pulse quicken, but he kept his voice calm. Why are you telling me this? Because I'm probably next, Devon said bitterly. I've been here 18 months. I've watched them do this over and over. They use us for diversity photo ops, then dispose of us when we're no longer useful, or when we ask uncomfortable questions. He paused. You seem like a good brother. I don't want to see another one of us get chewed up by this place. I appreciate the warning. Marcus studied Devon carefully. How long have you known this was their pattern? Since my second month here. Saw what they did to Carmen Rodriguez. She was a senior analyst before. You brilliant woman, MIT grad. She started asking questions about the Southbridge acquisitions. Wanted to know why we were targeting specific demographics. 2 weeks later, she was fired for unauthorized access to confidential files. Files she'd been explicitly told to review. Did she fight it? Devon laughed bitterly. With what? They made her sign an NDA as part of her severance. She can't talk about what she saw without losing the payout. That's how they do it. They buy your silence. Marcus's mind raced. This was worse than he'd thought. Caldwell wasn't just exploiting communities. He was exploiting black professionals, using them as scapegoats and disposable props. Devon, Marcus said carefully, what if there was a way to stop this? To expose what they're really doing? Devon's eyes widened, then filled with fear. Man, don't even think about it. You're smart. You've got skills. Just ride this out. Take the paycheck and find something better. Don't be a hero. Heroes get destroyed. Sometimes being destroyed is better than being complicit. Easy to say when you haven't seen what they do to people who cross them. Devon backed toward the door. Look, I said my piece. Be careful, Marcus, and whatever you're thinking about doing. Don't. After Devon left, Marcus sat in silence for a long moment. He thought about Carmen Rodriguez, about the 3 other black analysts who'd been sacrificed. He thought about his father, about the communities Caldwell was targeting, about all the people whose lives were treated as acceptable, collateral damage in the pursuit of profit. His encrypted phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. Remember why you're here. Don't lose sight of the mission. Marcus deleted the message and put the phone away. He didn't need reminders. He knew exactly why he was here. At 10 a.m. sharp, Marcus knocked on Caldwell's office door. Come in. Caldwell's voice was cheerful, energetic. Marcus entered to find him on a phone call, gesturing for Marcus to sit. Yes, Senator, I understand your concerns, but I assure you this is entirely above board. The jobs we're creating will more than offset any temporary disruption. Exactly. I appreciate your support. Yes, we'll make sure the campaign contribution goes through before the filing deadline. You have my word. Excellent. Talk soon. Caldwell hung up and beamed at Marcus. Sorry about that. Politics. Necessary. Evil when you're doing business at our scale. So, how was your first morning? Getting settled in? Very much so. I've been reviewing the Southbridge files. Impressive scope, isn't it? Caldwell's eyes lit up, with the fervor of a true believer explaining his gospel. This is legacy-building work, Marcus. We're talking about fundamentally reshaping American manufacturing, making it competitive again, efficient again, profitable again. I noticed the demographic analysis, Marcus said carefully. The targeting of specific communities. Caldwell's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. A calculation, a measurement. Yes, what did you think of that? This was a test. Marcus knew it instantly. Caldwell was gauging his reaction, seeing if Marcus would object, seeing if he was safe. Strategically sound, Marcus said, hating every word. These communities have the economic vulnerabilities that make the acquisitions financially viable. The data supports the approach. Caldwell relaxed visibly. I'm so glad you understand. You see, that's exactly why I wanted someone like you on this team. You can look at this objectively. Too many people. He waved his hand dismissively. They'd see those demographics and immediately cry racism. They wouldn't understand that this is just business. We're not discriminating against anyone. We're simply operating in the most efficient markets available. The fact that those markets are predominantly black communities is just demographics. Caldwell finished smoothly. Economic demographics. It's not about race, Marcus. It's about opportunity. These communities need what we're offering. They're dying on the vine. We're bringing investment, bringing jobs. Sure, maybe not the cushy union jobs they had before, but employment nonetheless. That's better than nothing. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, as if considering this perspective seriously. Inside, he was cataloging every word for future use. Now, Caldwell continued, pulling up a presentation on his computer screen. Let's talk about the first phase. We're acquiring the Riverside Manufacturing Facility in Mobile, Alabama. It's currently unionized, employing about 800 workers, mostly black, mostly middle-aged. They make automotive parts, decent operation, but operating at only 62% of optimal efficiency. We're going to change that. For the next 2 hours, Caldwell walked Marcus through the plan in excruciating detail. How they'd structure the acquisition through a web of shell companies to hide Titanium Global Industries' involvement until the deal was finalized. How they'd time the announcement to minimize media coverage. How they'd present the contract changes as modernization and competitive repositioning. How they'd handle union pushback. The key, Caldwell explained, is making it look like the workers have a choice. We offer the new contracts on a take-it-or-leave-it basis. Some will accept. The ones with families, mortgages, medical bills. They'll swallow their pride and take the pay cut because they can't afford not to. The proud ones, the troublemakers, the union agitators, they'll quit. And that's fine. That's actually ideal. We don't want malcontents in our operation. What about community response? Marcus asked. Activist groups, local politicians. That's where you come in. Caldwell smiled. I need you to create an economic impact report that shows our acquisition is net positive for mobile, job retention numbers, tax revenue projections, investment in infrastructure. We'll paint this as economic revitalization. The mayor is already in our pocket. We've promised to fund his next campaign. Local media is desperate for advertising revenue, which we'll provide. By the time anyone realizes what's really happening, it'll be too late to stop it. Marcus took careful notes, his pen scratching across the legal pad. Every word was evidence, every admission was ammunition. I can have a draft report ready by the end of the week, he said. Perfect. Caldwell stood, signaling the meeting's end. You're going to do great here, Marcus. I can feel it. You understand what we're building. You understand that sentiment has to take a back seat to progress. That's rare, especially in... He caught himself. Especially in people who look like me. Marcus finished, keeping his tone light, almost joking. Caldwell laughed, but it was uncomfortable. I was going to say especially in young people. Everyone's so sensitive these days. But you're different. You're pragmatic, practical. That's why I knew you were the right fit. As Marcus left the office, he felt physically ill. Not just from the conversation, but from his own performance. How easily he'd played the role of the good black employee. The one who didn't make white people uncomfortable. The one who accepted their rationalizations and justifications. His father would have been disgusted. His mother would have wept. But his father was dead. And his mother was living in a house Marcus paid for because the pension she'd been promised had evaporated when the company restructured. So Marcus swallowed his pride, buried his rage, and played the role he needed to play. Because he wasn't here to make himself feel better. He was here to destroy Richard Caldwell, and that required patience. Part 3, The Descent. Over the next 3 months, Marcus became invaluable to the Southbridge project. His economic impact reports were masterpieces of manipulative data analysis, technically accurate but framed to tell whatever story Caldwell wanted to hear. His financial models made the acquisitions looked like brilliant strategic moves rather than predatory exploitation. His presentations to potential investors were so polished that venture capital firms were lining up to fund Titanium Global Industries' expansion. He was the perfect employee, efficient, discret, loyal. He was also systematically documenting every crime, every ethical violation, every racist statement, every bribed official, every falsified report. Marcus developed a routine. He'd arrive at the office at 7:30 a.m. before most employees. He'd spend 30 minutes accessing files he wasn't supposed to see, photographing documents, downloading encrypted data onto portable drives hidden in his shoes. He'd work legitimately until 6 p.m., producing brilliant analysis that made Caldwell look like a genius. Then he'd stay late, often until 10 p.m., ostensibly catching up on work, but actually building his case. Jessica Thornton, Caldwell's assistant, noticed his dedication. "You're here more than Richard is," Ushi commented one evening, bringing him coffee without being asked. "Just trying to prove myself," Marcus replied with a self-deprecating smile. Jessica studied him for a moment. She was harder to read than most people. Years of working for Caldwell had taught her to keep her thoughts hidden. But sometimes, when Caldwell said something particularly vile, Marcus caught a flicker of disgust in her eyes. "Can I ask you something, Marcus?" she said quietly, checking to make sure they were alone. "Of course. Why are you really here?" Marcus's heart stopped. He kept his face neutral. "I'm not sure I understand the question." "You're too smart for this place." Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. "You're brilliant. I've seen your work. You could be anywhere. Goldman Sachs, McKinsey, Google. Any company would be lucky to have you. So why are you here, working for a man who—" She stopped herself. "Who what?" Jessica shook her head. "Nothing. Forget I said anything. Miss Thornton." Marcus made a decision in that split second. "Jessica, what do you know?" She looked at him for a long moment, and Marcus saw something break in her expression. A wall crumbling, revealing pain underneath. "I've worked for Richard Caldwell for 18 years. I've seen things, heard things. I've watched good people get destroyed because they wouldn't play along. I've watched him target communities that remind him of—" She stopped again, struggling with the words. "Remind him of what?" His father owned textile mills in South Carolina in the 60s and 70s. When integration happened, when black workers started demanding equal pay and safe conditions, his father's solution was to shut down the mills and move operations overseas. Left entire communities devastated. Richard thinks that was genius. He talks about it sometimes, when he's had too much to drink. He calls it knowing when to cut losses. Her voice cracked. "He means people. He means black people are losses to be cut." Marcus felt something shift in his chest. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I'm tired of being complicit." Jessica's eyes filled with tears. "I told myself I was just doing my job, just following orders. That's what people always say, isn't it? I was just following orders. But I'm not stupid. I know what he's doing. I know what the Southbridge Project really is. And I'm ashamed." Her voice broke. "I'm so ashamed that I've helped him do this for almost 2 decades. Marcus glanced at the security cameras in the hallway. "We can't talk here. There's a coffee shop 3 blocks north. Rosie's. I go there on my lunch break sometimes. Tomorrow, 1 o'clock. Jessica nodded and left quickly, her composure already returning. By the time she reached her desk, she was once again the perfectly professional assistant, showing no sign of their conversation. Marcus sat alone in his office, his mind racing. This changed everything. If Jessica was willing to help, if she had documentation from 18 years of working for Caldwell, the case he was building just became exponentially stronger, but it also meant the danger had exponentially increased. Every person who knew what he was doing multiplied his risk. His encrypted phone buzzed. Another message from the unknown number. "The mobile acquisition closes in 2 weeks. Time is running out." Marcus deleted the message and stared out his window at the city below. Somewhere down there, 800 workers immobile. Alabama were about to have their lives destroyed. Thousands more in 16 other cities were lined up behind them. Dominoes waiting to fall. 2 weeks. He had 2 weeks to gather enough evidence to bring down Titanium Global Industries. 2 weeks to make sure Caldwell couldn't lawyer his way out of this. 2 weeks to build a case so airtight that even corrupt judges and bought politicians couldn't ignore it. He pulled up the Riverside Manufacturing employee list on his screen. 800 names, 800 families. He read through them, memorizing faces from the personnel photos. Jerome Washington, 53, 26 years at the plant. Maria Santos, 47, single mother of 3. Darnell Cooper, 61, 2 years from retirement. These weren't statistics. They were people, and they were counting on someone to give a damn about them, even if they didn't know it yet. Marcus opened a new encrypted file and began typing. He titled it, The Titanium Papers. The next day at 1:00 p.m., Marcus walked into Rosie's coffee shop. It was a small, deliberately unpretentious place, the kind that catered to actual locals rather than tourists or business professionals. Jessica sat in a corner booth, 2 cups of coffee already on the table. "I got you black coffee," she said as he slid into the seat across from her. "I figured cream and sugar felt too presumptuous. Black's perfect." Marcus wrapped his hands around the warm cup. "Thank you." They sat in silence for a moment. Jessica looked different outside the office, smaller, more vulnerable. Without the armor of her professional persona, she seemed almost fragile. "I don't even know how to start this conversation," she finally said. "Start with why you stayed so long." Jessica laughed bitterly. "That's the question, isn't it? Why do we stay in situations that violate our values? Why do we compromise ourselves?" She stared into her coffee. "I was 25 when I started working for Richard. Fresh out of Northwestern, drowning in student debt, desperate to prove myself. He was charismatic, successful, powerful. He made me feel important, valued, and the money was good, better than I could get anywhere else with my experience level. And then you saw who he really was. Gradually. It wasn't one moment. It was 1,000 small moments. Comments he'd make about employees, jokes at other people's expense, the way he'd change his behavior depending on who was in the room. By the time I fully understood what kind of man he was, I'd been there 5 years. I'd bought an apartment. I had a 401k. I'd built my entire life around this job. She looked up at Marcus, and I'd compromised myself so many times that walking away felt impossible. How do you admit to yourself that you've wasted years enabling someone evil? You didn't waste them if you stop him now. Jessica's eyes widened. Is that what you're trying to do? Marcus hesitated. Trust was a currency he couldn't afford to spend carelessly. What I'm trying to do is irrelevant if I don't have evidence. I have evidence. Jessica's voice was steady now, determined. I have 18 years of emails, memos, financial documents, recorded phone calls. Richard thinks I'm just his loyal assistant, but I've been keeping copies of everything. Not because I planned to use it. I think part of me was just trying to prove to myself that I wasn't crazy, that the things I was seeing were really happening. Why didn't you go to the authorities? With what? A disgruntled employee's accusations against a billionaire. Marcus, Richard has senators on speed dial. He plays golf with federal judges. He donates millions to political campaigns. The system protects people like him. She leaned forward. But the court of public opinion, that's different. People like Richard can survive legal battles. They can't survive complete public destruction. The kind that happens when ordinary people see exactly who they really are. Marcus studied her carefully. If you help me, you'll lose everything. Your job, your career, probably your savings in legal fees. Caldwell will destroy you. He already has destroyed me, Jessica said quietly. I just didn't realize it until yesterday. When I watched you sitting in that office looking at files about people in mobile, and I saw something in your face, pain, rage, determination. It reminded me that I used to feel things, that I used to believe in something beyond just survival. I want that back. Marcus made a decision. He pulled out his encrypted phone and slid it across the table. There's a folder on here labeled Titanium Papers. Everything I've gathered so far. Look at it. Make sure you understand what you're getting into. Then decide. Jessica took the phone. For the next 20 minutes, she scrolled through documents, her face growing progressively paler. When she finally looked up, tears were streaming down her face. "My God," she whispered. "I knew it was bad, but this is monstrous. That's why I need your help. My access is limited. I can get operational documents, financial models, strategic plans, but I can't get to the communications. The emails where Caldwell discusses bribing politicians, the phone calls where he explicitly discusses targeting black communities, the internal memos that reveal his real motivations. You can." Jessica wiped her eyes and straightened her shoulders. Marcus watched her transform, the fragile woman disappearing, replaced by someone harder, more resolved. "What do you need?" Over the next 10 days, Marcus and Jessica became partners in what Jessica called the world's most justified corporate espionage. They developed systems, protocols, dead drops. She'd identify key documents and leave them in places Marcus could access them. A folder accidentally left in the conference room. A briefcase forgotten in Caldwell's office when she knew Marcus would be working late. The documentation was devastating. Jessica had access to everything. 20 years of Richard Caldwell's unfiltered thoughts, strategies, and communications. And what they revealed was worse than Marcus had imagined. There were emails to other CEOs discussing optimal labor, exploitation ratios in communities, with limited employment, alternatives, corporate speak for crushing poor black workers who had nowhere else to turn. There were recorded phone calls with politicians where Caldwell explicitly promised campaign contributions in exchange for blocking worker protection legislation. There were internal presentations that used phrases like demographic vulnerabilities and racial economic disparities as strategic advantages to be exploited. One document made Marcus physically sick, a psychological profile commissioned by Caldwell that analyzed how black workers in formerly industrial cities responded to economic trauma. The study, conducted by an expensive consulting firm, concluded that workers in these communities would accept worse conditions than white workers because historical patterns of employment discrimination have created lowered expectations and increased tolerance for workplace adversity. In other words, black people are so used to being treated like garbage that you can treat them like garbage and they'll accept it. Marcus sat in his office at 11 p.m. on a Friday night, reading this document for the third time, and finally allowed himself to cry. Not dramatic sobs, just silent tears running down his face as he thought about his father, about Jerome Washington and Maria Santos and Darnell Cooper, about every black person who'd ever swallowed their dignity and accepted less because the system had convinced them they deserved less. A soft knock on his door made him quickly wipe his eyes. Jessica stood in the doorway, her own eyes red-rimmed. "I just uploaded the last batch of files to your server," she said quietly. She stepped inside and closed the door. "Marcus, there's something else you need to know. Something I only discovered today." "What?" "Richard has a son, James Caldwell. He's 26, works in mergers and acquisitions for Goldman Sachs in New York. Richard's been grooming him to eventually take over Titanium Global Industries." She paused. "I've been reading James's emails. Richard forwards them to me sometimes, bragging about his son, Marcus. I think James might be different." Marcus looked up sharply. "Different how?" He pushes back. Carefully, subtly, but he pushes back. "There's an email," chain from 3 months ago where Richard was discussing the Southbridge project, and James wrote back, questioning the ethics of it. Richard dismissed him, said he was too soft, too influenced by liberal business school professors. But James didn't drop it. He kept asking questions. That doesn't mean he's an ally, Marcus said carefully. It means he's smarter about public relations. Maybe. Jessica pulled out her phone and showed Marcus an email. But read this. It's from last week. The email was from James to Richard. Dad, I've been thinking more about the Southbridge acquisitions. I understand the business logic, but I'm concerned about the optics. If this gets out, the targeting of specific communities, the union busting, the wage cuts, it could destroy our reputation. More importantly, it's going to hurt people who don't have other options. I know you think I'm being naive, but I genuinely believe we could structure this differently. Better wages, preserved benefits, actual investment in these communities rather than extraction. We'd make less profit, sure, but we'd build something sustainable, something we could be proud of. Richard's response was brutal. James, when you run your own company, you can run it like a charity. Until then, remember that sentiment doesn't pay dividends. These people will thank us for the jobs we provide, regardless of the terms. They always do. Marcus read the exchange twice. This doesn't prove James would help us. No, Jessica agreed, but it proves he has a conscience. And a conscience can be leveraged, or it's performative. Rich kids love to perform concern about inequality while still cashing their trust fund checks. Jessica shook her head. I've known James since he was 8 years old. I watched him grow up. He's not like Richard. He's never been like Richard. His mother, Richard's ex-wife, Sarah, she raised him with different values. She despised Richard's business practices. The divorce was ugly, partially because she found out about some of Richard's more questionable dealings and threatened to go public. Richard bought her silence, but not before she'd already influenced James. Marcus considered this. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting that if we want to truly destroy Richard Caldwell, we need someone inside his family, someone who can access documents and communications even I can't reach, someone whose testimony would be impossible to dismiss as a disgruntled employee. Scheit met Marcus's eyes. I think we should approach James. That's insane. We'd be revealing ourselves to Caldwell's son. We'd be recruiting Caldwell's son. There's a difference. Jessica pulled up another document on her phone. Look at this. It's Richard's will. I handle his estate planning documents. When Richard dies, James inherits controlling interest in Titanium Global Industries. But there's a clause. If James is deemed incompetent or unsuitable by the board of directors, control passes to Richard's brother Michael, who's even worse than Richard. James knows this. He knows his father has built in a trap. If he pushes back too hard, he loses everything. So why would he risk helping us? Because, Jessica said softly, sometimes the only way to be free is to burn down your inheritance. Marcus stood and walked to the window. Below, Chicago glittered with artificial light, beautiful and cold. He thought about leverage, about risk, about the probability of success versus the cost of failure. If we approach James and we're wrong about him, Marcus said slowly, Richard will know what we're doing. He'll shut us down before we can do anything. If we don't approach James, we might not have enough to take Richard down permanently. Rich white men survive scandals all the time. They hire expensive lawyers, settle out of court, issue insincere apologies, and move on. We need something that makes that impossible. We need Richard's own son to testify against him. Marcus turned back to Jessica. How would we even approach him? I have his personal email, not his work email, his actual personal one. He gave it to me years ago, told me if I ever needed anything, I could reach him directly. He meant it kindly, I think. He knew working for his father wasn't easy. She paused. I could send him a message, feel him out, see if he's willing to meet. And if he tells his father, then we're done. Jessica's voice was steady, but I don't think he will. Call it intuition, call it hope, but I believe James Caldwell has been waiting for an excuse to stop his father. We might be that excuse. Marcus thought about his father, about the 800 workers in Mobile, about Devin Carter and Carmen, Rodriguez and every other person who'd been chewed up and spit out by Richard Caldwell's machine. Do it, he said finally, but carefully. Don't give him specifics. Just tell him we have information about his father's business, practices, and we think he deserves to know the truth. See how he responds. Jessica nodded and pulled up her email on her phone. Marcus watched over her shoulder as she typed, "James, this is Jessica Thornton. I hope you're well. I'm writing about a sensitive matter regarding Titanium Global Industries and your father's current business operations. I have reason to believe you may have concerns about the direction of certain projects. I'm in contact with someone who has gathered extensive documentation that you should see. If you're willing to meet confidentially, please let me know. This is not a trap, and I'm not asking for anything except your time. I think you'll understand why after you see what we have. JT." She looked at Marcus. "Last chance to stop this. Send it." Jessica hit send. The email disappeared into the digital void. For a moment, they both stood in silence, the weight of what they'd just done settling over them. "Now we wait," Jessica said. "Now we wait," Marcus agreed. The response came 36 hours later, at 2:17 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Marcus was asleep when his encrypted phone buzzed with a notification. Jessica had forwarded James's reply, "Miss Thornton, I'm surprised to hear from you, but not as surprised as I probably should be. I've been watching certain developments at TGI with increasing concern. I can't discuss this via email, and I can't be seen meeting with you in Chicago where my father might find out. I'm flying to Milwaukee tomorrow for client meetings. Can you come there? There's a restaurant called The Edison, 8 p.m. Tell the host you're with the Caldwell party. Come alone or with one other person, your choice. If this is what I think it is, we have a lot to discuss. James." Marcus read the message 3 times, analyzing every word. Milwaukee was 2 hours from Chicago. Neutral ground. Public place. James was being careful, but he was also clearly interested. Could be a trap, Marcus muttered to himself. His phone buzzed again, a text from Jessica. "I know what you're thinking. It's not a trap. James wouldn't do that, but I understand if you don't want to go." Marcus typed back, "We're going, both of us. If this goes wrong, I want a witness." Jessica's response was immediate. "I'll drive. Pick you up at 5 p.m. tomorrow." Part 5. The Air. The Edison was upscale, but not pretentious. Exposed brick, Edison bulb lighting, a craft cocktail menu that took itself seriously, but not too seriously. Marcus and Jessica arrived at exactly 8 p.m. and were immediately escorted to a private dining room in the back. James Caldwell stood when they entered. He was tall like his father, but leaner, with dark hair and his mother's kind eyes. He wore jeans and a simple button-down shirt, deliberately casual, Marcos noted, trying to put them at ease, or trying to seem less threatening than his father. "Ms. Thornton," James shook Jessica's hand warmly. "It's good to see you. It's been too long. Please call me Jessica. We're not in the office." She gestured to Marcus. "This is Marcus Webb. He works as a senior analyst at TGI." "I know." James extended his hand to Marcus. "I've read your work. You're brilliant. My father raves about you, which, knowing my father, probably makes you deeply uncomfortable." Marcus shook his hand, surprised by the directness. "It's complicated." "I bet." James gestured for them to sit. "I ordered wine. Hope that's okay. I figured we could all use a drink for this conversation." They sat. A server appeared, poured wine, left menus, disappeared. James waited until they were alone again before speaking. "So," he said quietly, "let me start by saying that I've suspected for months that something deeply wrong was happening. At TGI, my father has been unusually secretive about the Southbridge project. Every time I ask questions, he deflects or dismisses me. He says I'm too soft, too idealistic, that I don't understand business. James's jaw tightened. But I understand. Business just fine. I understand profit, margins and efficiency and competitive advantage. What I don't understand is why my father seems hell-bent on targeting communities that are already struggling. It's not an accident, Marcus said carefully. It's the strategy. James closed his eyes briefly. I was afraid you'd say that. Jessica pulled out a tablet from her bag and slid it across the table. Everything's on here. Financial documents, internal memos, communications with politicians, strategic analyses, all of it authenticated, all of it admissible. Read it, then we'll talk. James opened the tablet and began scrolling. Marcus watched his face carefully, cataloging every reaction, the way his eyes widened as he read the demographic targeting documents, the way his jaw clenched when he reached the psychological profiles, the way his hands started shaking when he got to the emails, discussing acceptable casualty rates for workers who couldn't adapt to the new contracts. 20 minutes passed in near silence. Finally, James set the tablet down and looked up. His eyes were wet. "My father is a monster," he said simply. "Yes," Marcus agreed. "I knew he was ruthless. I knew he prioritized profit over people. But this," James gestured at the tablet, "this is systematic, calculated. He's deliberately targeting black communities because he thinks he can get away with destroying them." He looked at Marcus. "You're black. You work for him. How have you not killed him?" Marcus finished. "Trust me, the thought has crossed my mind." James laughed, but it was bitter. "I'm sorry. That was a stupid question. You're there for the same reason Jessica is, I assume. Gathering evidence, building a case." "We're building more than a case," Jessica said. "We're building total destruction. When we release this, your father won't just face legal consequences. He'll face complete annihilation of his reputation, his business, his legacy. Everything he's built will burn." "Good," James said immediately. Then more quietly, "I know he's my father. I know I'm supposed to love him, protect him. But I can't defend this. I won't." "Then help us," Marcus said. "You have access we don't. Board meetings, private conversations, documents that never get digitized. Your testimony would be impossible to dismiss." James was quiet for a long moment. "If I do this, I lose my family. My father will never forgive me. My Uncle Michael will make sure I'm cut off from everything. I'll probably lose my job. Goldman Sachs won't want the controversy. My trust fund will evaporate. Everything I've built my life on goes away." "Yes," Marcus said. "No point in lying. But those workers in Mobile keep their jobs," James said slowly. "And the 16 other communities he's targeting stay intact. And maybe, this sends a message that you can't just destroy. Black communities for profit. Maybe." Marcus agreed. James picked up his wine glass and drained it. "I need you to understand something. My father has spent my entire life trying to mold me into his image. He's told me 1,000 times that sentiment is weakness, that compassion is naivety, that the world is divided into winners and losers, and our job is to be winners. He's disappointed in me constantly because I won't fully embrace that worldview." He set the glass down. "Destroying him, destroying everything he's built. That's not just about justice for those workers. It's about proving he was wrong, about proving that maybe there's a different way to be successful." "There is," Jessica said softly. "I've spent 18 years watching the wrong way. I'd like to spend the rest of my life watching the right way." James looked at Marcus. "What do you need from me?" Marcus pulled out his encrypted phone and slid it across the table. "First, we need you to set up a secure communication channel. Use the Signal app. Encrypted, untraceable. Second, we need you to document everything you witness. Every conversation with your father about Southbridge. Every board meeting, every communication with investors. Third, And this is crucial. We need you to be our insurance policy. If something happens to Jessica or me, if we disappear or get fired or have accidents, we need you to release everything to the press. You think he'd hurt you? James looked alarmed. Your father has billions of dollars and no conscience, Marcus said flatly. If he discovers what we're doing, he'll do whatever it takes to protect himself. We need insurance. James nodded slowly. Okay, what else? Eventually, we're going to need you to testify publicly on the record. We'll need you to stand in front of cameras and explain exactly what your father did and why it was wrong. Can you do that? Will it stop him? It'll destroy him. James met Marcus's eyes. Then yes, I can do that. Jessica reached across the table and took James's hand. You're doing the right thing. I hope so. James squeezed her hand, then released it. When do we start? We already have, Marcus said. The mobile acquisition closes in 1 week. We need to move fast. Over the next 6 days, the three of them worked with the focus of people who knew time was running out. James proved invaluable. He had access to Richard's home office, where the truly incriminating documents were kept. He recorded conversations with his father, using a pen with a hidden microphone that Jessica had acquired. He attended a board meeting and documented the director's complicity in the Southbridge project. But most importantly, James provided context. He could explain things that Marcus and Jessica couldn't. The family dynamics, Richard's psychological motivations, the web of relationships that kept him protected. He explained how his father had cultivated relationships with judges and politicians over decades, how he'd positioned himself as untouchable. My father believes he's invincible, James explained during one late-night call. He's gotten away with things for so long that he genuinely thinks there are no consequences for people like him. That's going to be his downfall. He's careless because he doesn't believe he can be hurt. We need to be smarter than him, Marcus said. We need to anticipate every move. I know his moves, James replied. I've watched him destroy people my entire life. When you release this information, he'll immediately attack your credibility. He'll claim you're disgruntled employees, that you doctored documents, that you're part of some conspiracy. He'll throw money at lawyers who'll bury you in litigation. He'll call in favors from politicians who'll investigate you instead of him. So how do we counter that? We don't give him time, James said. We release everything at once to multiple outlets simultaneously. Print, broadcast, online. We include so much authenticated documentation that it's impossible to dismiss. And we go public ourselves. Press conference, clear message, human faces on the story. We make it about the workers in mobile, not about him. We make him the villain in a story about ordinary people trying to survive. That's good, Jessica said. That could work. It has to work, James said quietly. Because if it doesn't, my father will dedicate the rest of his life to destroying all of us. Marcus thought about his father again, about the price of standing up to powerful people. Some things are worth being destroyed for. Yes, James agreed. They are. The mobile acquisition was scheduled to close on Friday, October 17th at 2 p.m. That meant Marcus, Jessica, and James had until Thursday night to finalize everything. Marcus worked 20-hour days, running on coffee and fury. He organized thousands of documents into a coherent narrative. He created an executive summary that even a reporter with no business background could understand. He built timelines, flowcharts, evidence chains. He wanted this so airtight that even Caldwell's army of lawyers couldn't find a crack. Jessica pulled together 18 years of incriminating communications. She created a database cross-referencing every bribe, every threat, every illegal action. She authenticated every document with timestamps and metadata. She assembled a prosecutorial case file that would make federal investigators' jobs embarrassingly easy. James recorded his father in ways that made Marcus uncomfortable. but were absolutely necessary. Conversations where Richard explicitly discussed targeting black communities, discussions of bribery and corruption, admissions of financial fraud. James did it with clinical precision, his voice steady even as his father revealed himself as exactly the monster they all knew he was. On Thursday, October 16th, at 6 p.m., they met at a different restaurant in Milwaukee. This time, they brought someone new, Chloe Martinez. Chloe was the investigative journalist for ProPublica, 34 years old, with a reputation for taking down corporations and a Pulitzer Prize on her shelf. She was Latina, fierce and unintimidated by power. Marcus had reached out to her 3 days earlier, and after seeing a preview of the documents, she'd cleared her entire schedule. "This is the biggest story I've ever worked on," Chloe said, her laptop open, recording devices on the table. "But I need to be sure you understand what happens when we publish. Caldwell will come after all of you with everything he has. He'll try to destroy your lives. He already destroyed my father's life," Marcus said. "I'm just returning the favor." Chloe studied him. "I'm going to ask you something, and I need you to be honest. Is any of this documentation falsified? Because if it is, the whole thing collapses and you all go to jail." "Every document is authenticated," Jessica said firmly. "I can provide metadata, email headers, verification of digital signatures. I've been Richard's executive assistant for 18 years. I know which documents are real. And you," Chloe turned to James, "are really willing to testify against your own father?" "Oh, he's not my father," James said quietly. "He's a man who shares my DNA and spent my childhood teaching me how to be cruel. I don't owe him loyalty." Chloe nodded slowly. "Okay, here's how this works. I publish the story Sunday morning. That gives you Friday and Saturday to get somewhere safe. Marcus, Jessica, you both need to disappear. Clean out your apartments, close your bank accounts, go somewhere Caldwell can't immediately find you. James, you need to be in a public place when the story drops, surrounded by witnesses. Caldwell will be furious and angry people make mistakes. I'll be at my mother's house in Connecticut," James said. "She'll protect me." "Good." Chloe turned to Marcus and Jessica. "Where will you two go?" Marcus and Jessica exchanged glances. They hadn't actually discussed this. "I have a cabin in northern Wisconsin," Jessica said slowly. "It's in my sister's name, no connection to me that anyone could easily find. We could go there." "Both of you?" Chloe asked. "Both of us," Marcus confirmed. He and Jessica had become partners in this, maybe friends, certainly co-conspirators. It made sense to stay together until the aftermath settled. "All right." Chloe pulled up her publication schedule. "The story goes live Sunday at 6 a.m. Eastern. I'm coordinating with the New York Times, Washington Post, and The Guardian for simultaneous publication. They're all getting exclusive pieces of the evidence. By Sunday afternoon, every news outlet in America will be covering this. By Monday, Congress will be calling for investigations. By Tuesday, Caldwell will be testifying in front of committees. And by Wednesday, Titanium Global Industries stock will be in free fall." "What about the workers?" Marcus asked. "The 800 people in Mobile who are about to lose their jobs." "That's the beautiful part," Chloe said with a grin. "Once this story breaks, Caldwell can't proceed with the acquisition. The publicity would be toxic. He'll have to back out. Those workers keep their jobs, at least for now. And the 16 other communities you've documented, also saved. No one's going to let him proceed after everyone knows what he's really doing." Marcus felt something release in his chest, a tension he'd been carrying for months. They were actually going to do this. They were actually going to stop Richard Caldwell. "There's one more thing," James said quietly. "My father keeps physical documents in a safe in his home office. Documents he would never digitize because he knows they're too incriminating. Evidence of bribes to federal officials, details of offshore accounts, communications with organized crime figures he's done business with. If we could get those documents, we'd have enough to send him to prison," Marcus finished. "Can you access the safe?" Chloe asked. "I know the combination," James admitted. He made me memorize it years ago. Told me if anything ever happened to him, I'd need to access his insurance policy. He thought he was protecting the family. Really, he was handing me the keys to his destruction. When can you get them? Tomorrow. He's flying to Mobile for the acquisition closing. He'll be gone from 6 a.m. to 9 p.m. I can go to the house, get the documents, scan them, and put them back before he returns. That's incredibly dangerous, Jessica said. Everything about this is dangerous, James replied. But we're past the point of safety. We're committed. Marcus looked at each of them in turn. Jessica, who'd found her courage after 18 years. James, who'd chosen justice over family. Chloe, who'd chosen truth over safety. And himself, who'd chosen revenge that looked like righteousness. We're really doing this, he said. We're really doing this, Chloe confirmed. They spent the next 3 hours going over every detail of the plan. Timing, contingencies, communication protocols. By the time they left the restaurant at 10:01 p.m., they had a plan that was either brilliant or insane. Possibly both. As Marcus and Jessica drove back to Chicago, neither spoke for a long time. Finally, Jessica broke the silence. Are you scared? Terrified, Marcus admitted. You? I've been scared for 18 years. This is the first time I'm scared of something worth being scared of. Marcus understood exactly what she meant. Friday morning, Marcus went to work as usual. He smiled at the security guard, made small talk with the receptionist, acted like it was just another day. Inside, his heart hammered against his ribs. He had 8 hours to copy the last remaining files from Caldwell's office computer. 8 hours to sweep his own office of anything personal. 8 hours before he walked out of Titanium Global Industries forever. Devon. Carter stopped by his office at 11 a.m. Hey, man, Devon said, leaning against the doorframe. You okay? You seem off. Marcus looked at Devon. Another black man trapped in Caldwell's machine, trying to survive. He made a decision. Devon, you need to update your resume. Devon's eyes narrowed. Why? Because in about 48 hours, this company is going to implode. And when it does, anyone associated with Caldwell is going to have their career destroyed. Marcus lowered his voice. I can't tell you more than that. But trust me, get out now. Find another job. Distance yourself. Devon studied him for a long moment. You're the one doing it. Whatever's about to happen, it's you. Marcus didn't confirm or deny. Good, Devon said quietly. Burn it all down. And if you need a witness about what this place is really like, you know where to find me. After Devon left, Marcus spent the next 6 hours methodically copying files. Every email Caldwell had ever sent from his office computer. Every financial model, every strategic document. He left nothing behind. At 5:00 p.m., he cleaned out his desk. Personal items went into a box. His computer he wiped clean using military-grade data destruction software. By 5:30 p.m., there was no trace that Marcus Webb had ever existed at Titanium Global Industries. He took one last look at the office, at the window with the view of the south side, at the desk, where he'd spent months planning Richard Caldwell's destruction. Then he walked out. Jessica was waiting in the parking garage, her car loaded with everything she owned. Ready? She asked. Let's go. They drove north, toward Wisconsin, toward safety. Marcus's phone buzzed with a message from James. I'm in. The safe is open. This is worse than we thought. He has documentation of everything. Everything. I'm scanning now. Marcus texted back. How much worse? James. Fraud, bribery, money laundering, connections to human trafficking through overseas suppliers. My father isn't just a corrupt businessman. He's a criminal. Marcus felt sick. Get out of there as soon as you can. James, almost done. 20 more minutes. Those 20 minutes felt like hours. Marcus and Jessica drove in tense silence, checking the mirrors constantly, waiting for James to confirm he was safe. Finally, I'm out. Documents are scanned and uploaded to the shared drive. Originals are back in the safe. He'll never know I was there. I'm leaving for Connecticut now. See you on the other side." Marcus exhaled slowly. They'd done it. They had everything. Jessica's cabin was exactly what they needed. Isolated, comfortable, stocked with supplies. They arrived at 9 p.m. and spent the next hour setting up their command center. Laptops on the dining table, secure internet connection, encrypted phones charged and ready. At 10 p.m., Marcus sent Chloe a message. "We're secure. Transmitting final documents now." Chloe received. "Holy shit, Marcus. This is bigger than Watergate. Publishing in 32 hours. Get some rest. You're going to need it." Marcus tried to sleep, but couldn't. He kept seeing his father's face, kept thinking about Jerome Washington and the 800 workers in Mobile, who had no idea their lives had just been saved. Kept wondering if what he was doing was justice or just revenge, dressed up in noble clothing. At 2 a.m., he found Jessica sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, staring at the stars. "Can't sleep either?" he asked, sitting beside her. "Too wired." She handed him a cup of tea. "I keep thinking about how many years I wasted being complicit. How many people were hurt while I just kept working, kept collecting my paycheck, kept telling myself it wasn't my responsibility. You're stopping it now. That counts for something. Does it? Does being brave for 6 months erase 18 years of cowardice?" Marcus thought about that. "I don't know. Maybe we don't get to erase our mistakes. Maybe we just have to live with them and try to do better." Jessica laughed bitterly. "That's not very comforting. It's not supposed to be comfortable. It's supposed to be true." They sat in silence for a while, drinking tea, watching the stars. "What will you do after?" Jessica asked. "After all this is over and Caldwell is destroyed?" "I don't know," Marcus admitted. "I've spent so long focused on bringing him down that I haven't thought about what comes next. Maybe I'll actually use my degree to do something good. Start a nonprofit, advocate for workers' rights. Something that helps instead of hurts." "That sounds good." Jessica smiled. "Maybe I'll do the same. God knows I need to balance the karmic scales. We both do." At 6 a.m. on Sunday, October 19th, Marcus and Jessica sat at the dining table with their laptops open, refreshing their browsers every few seconds. 6:01 a.m. ProPublica published The Titanium Papers, How Richard Caldwell Built an Empire on the Exploitation of Black Communities. 6:02 a.m. The New York Times published Titanium, Global Industries, a Case Study in Corporate Racism. 6:03 a.m. The Washington Post published Exclusive, Documents Reveal Systematic Targeting of Minority Workers by Major Corporation. 6:05 a.m. The Guardian published The Hidden Victims of American Industry, How One CEO Made Billions, Destroying Black Neighborhoods. By 7 a.m., the story was trending #1 on Twitter. By 8 a.m., cable news was covering it non-stop. By 9 a.m., politicians were calling for investigations. By 10 a.m., Titanium Global Industries' stock had dropped 34%. Marcus and Jessica watched it all unfold in real time, barely breathing. At 11 a.m., Richard Caldwell held an emergency press conference. Marcus watched as the man who'd seemed so powerful, so untouchable, stood in front of cameras looking smaller than Marcus had ever seen him. "These allegations are completely false," Caldwell said, his voice shaking with rage. "This is a coordinated attack by disgruntled employees and sensationalist journalists trying to destroy a successful American company. We will be pursuing legal action against everyone involved. The documents they claim to have are fabricated. This is nothing but a witch hunt." "Mr. Caldwell," a reporter interrupted, "your own son has confirmed the authenticity of these documents." James Caldwell released a statement this morning saying he witnessed you discussing these strategies. "How do you respond to your own son calling you a racist and a criminal?" The look on Richard Caldwell's face, shock, betrayal, fury, was everything Marcus had hoped for. "My son," has been manipulated, Caldwell said stiffly. He's young, impressionable. He's 26 and works at Goldman Sachs. Another reporter called out. He's hardly a child. He's also released recordings of your private conversations. A third reporter added, conversations where you explicitly discuss targeting black communities because you believe they'll accept exploitation more readily than white workers. Would you like to comment on those recordings? Caldwell's face turned red. This press conference is over. He walked off camera. In the background, you could hear him screaming at his communications team. Marcus watched it with something between satisfaction and horror. He'd done this. He'd destroyed a man in front of the entire world. How do you feel? Jessica asked quietly. Honestly, I don't know. His phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. Marcus Webb? A woman's voice. Yes, this is Senator Catherine Williams. I chair the Senate Committee on Labor and Economic Opportunity. I've been reading the Titanium Papers. I'd like you to testify at congressional hearings next week. Will you do that? Marcus looked at Jessica, who was listening. She nodded. Yes, Senator. I'll testify. Good. Because we're going to make sure what Caldwell did never happens again. We're going to rewrite the laws, and we need people like you to explain why it matters. After he hung up, Marcus sat in stunned silence. It's really happening, Jessica whispered. We really did it. Part 8. The Reckoning. The congressional hearings took place over 3 days in late October. Marcus testified on the first day, walking through every aspect of the Southbridge project, explaining in clear terms how Richard Caldwell had systematically targeted black communities for exploitation. He brought physical evidence, stacks of documents, financial models, communications. He showed the psychological profile that analyzed how to exploit racial, economic trauma. He played recordings of Caldwell explicitly discussing his strategies. The senators were horrified. Even the conservative ones, the ones who typically defended corporations, couldn't find a way to defend this. Mr. Webb, Senator Williams said at one point, you've described what is essentially economic warfare targeted at black Americans. Is that a fair characterization? That's exactly what it is, Senator, Marcus replied. Mr. Caldwell identified communities that were economically vulnerable due to generations of systemic racism, and he weaponized that vulnerability for profit. He didn't just exploit these communities. He specifically chose them because of their racial demographics and the historical disadvantages they face. The hearing room was silent except for camera shutters. Day 2, Jessica testified, walking through 18 years of documentation. Every bribe, every falsified report, every instance of Caldwell using wealth and connections to circumvent worker protection laws. Miss Thornton, why didn't you come forward sooner? Because I was a coward, Senator. I told myself I was just doing my job. Silence is complicity. I was complicit for 18 years, and I will carry that shame for the rest of my life. But I'm here now, and I will spend whatever time I have left trying to make amends. Day 3, James Caldwell testified. The room was packed. Everyone wanted to see the son testify against his father. Mr. Caldwell, you stand to inherit your father's entire empire. Why are you here testifying against him? Because inheritance built on suffering isn't worth having. My father spent my childhood teaching me that success means crushing other people, that compassion is weakness, that the world is divided into winners and losers, and our job as wealthy white people is to make sure we stay winners no matter who we have to hurt. James paused. I reject that worldview entirely. I reject the idea that being born into privilege gives me the right to exploit those who weren't. You understand that by testifying, you're likely forfeiting your inheritance. I understand that by not testifying, I'd be forfeiting my soul. The hearing room erupted in applause. Over the next hour, James walked through private conversations with his father. He played recordings that made even jaded senators flinch. But the most damning was from a family dinner 3 months earlier. Richard's voice on the recording. James, you need to understand something about the world. There are people who build and people who take. We're builders. We create wealth, create jobs, create value. And yes, sometimes that means people get hurt. But those people, the ones in Mobile, in Detroit, in all these dying cities, they were going to fail anyway. We're not destroying them. We're just accelerating the inevitable. And if we profit from it, that's not exploitation. That's efficiency. James's voice. Dad, these are people. They have families, dreams. Richard. They're labor units. James. Interchangeable, replaceable labor units. The sooner you understand that, the sooner you can be effective in business. Sentiment is a luxury we can't afford. The recording ended. The silence was deafening. Labor units. Senator Williams repeated slowly. Your father called human beings labor units. That's how he sees people. That's how he's always seen people. Especially black people, especially poor people. To him, they're not fully human. They're resources to be extracted and discarded. Over the next weeks, the dominoes fell. The SEC launched an investigation. The FBI opened a criminal probe. The IRS audited 20 years of returns. State attorneys general filed lawsuits. The board forced Caldwell to resign. Stock entered free fall. Investors pulled out. Richard Caldwell's empire collapsed in real time. Marcus took a position with the Department of Labor redesigning regulations. Jessica joined Senator Williams's staff, drafting new legislation. James liquidated his trust fund, creating a foundation for worker advocacy. 6 months later, Marcus stood outside, Riverside Manufacturing in Mobile, Alabama, watching workers file in for the morning shift. The acquisition had been stopped. Workers had negotiated living wages. The union was stronger than ever. Jerome Washington, 53 years old, walked past and extended his hand. You the one from the news? The one who stopped Caldwell? I owe you everything. You saved my job, my pension. My daughter's going to college because of what you did. Marcus shook his hand, emotion welling in his throat. I'm glad, sir. Really glad. Why'd you do it? You had a good job, making good money. Why risk all that for people you didn't even know? Marcus thought about his father, about all the Leon Webbs in the world who'd been used up and thrown away by men like Richard Caldwell, because someone had to give a damn. His phone buzzed, a text from James. Caldwell just pled guilty to avoid trial. 15 years in federal prison. It's over. Marcus stared at the message. 15 years. Richard Caldwell would be 78 when he got out, if he survived prison at all. His empire was gone, his reputation destroyed, his legacy forever tainted. Marcus thought he'd feel triumphant. Instead, he just felt tired, and maybe underneath the tiredness, something like peace. That evening, he visited his father's grave for the first time in years. He sat on the grass beside the headstone. I don't know if what I did was justice or revenge or something in between, but I know that 800 families in Mobile still have their jobs. I know that 16 communities aren't going to be destroyed. I know the laws are changing, so what happened to you will be harder to do in the future. He paused. I know it doesn't bring you back, but maybe your suffering wasn't for nothing. Maybe something came from all this pain. Chloe called that night. Hey, I just wanted to let you know, I won the Pulitzer for the Titanium Papers investigation. I'm donating half the prize money to James's Worker Advocacy Fund. The story belongs to all of us. After he hung up, Marcus thought about the future, about laws protecting workers, regulations preventing exploitation, systems becoming incrementally more just. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. Generations of systemic racism and corporate exploitation couldn't be undone by one investigation, one set of laws, one man going to prison. But it was something. It was a start. Marcus opened his laptop and began drafting his first policy proposal. Protecting vulnerable communities from predatory corporate practices. And then he got to work. Because the fight wasn't over. It was never over. But now at least he knew it was a fight worth having. Now he knew that sometimes, not always, but sometimes, The truth could bring down the powerful. Now he knew that 3 people with courage and documentation could topple an empire. Now he knew his father's death didn't have to be meaningless. And now finally, Marcus Webb knew exactly who he was and what he was fighting for. He was the son of Leon Webb, who worked himself to death, believing in a system that betrayed him. He was an analyst who turned his skills toward justice. He was a whistleblower who risked everything for people he'd never met. He was exactly who his father raised him to be. And Richard Caldwell, the billionaire who believed himself untouchable, who built an empire on black suffering, who thought Marcus would be too grateful and scared to fight back, was wrong about everything. Some secrets are worth dying for. Some truths are worth sacrificing everything to reveal, and some people refuse to be crushed. They fight back, and sometimes, just sometimes, they win. In memory of every worker told their labor, dignity, and lives didn't matter. Your struggle is not forgotten.